Hey horror fans, welcome back to Room 237, and I'm back with, again, not quite a horror film, but it is another sort of controversial, known to be kind of shocking or disturbing art house film. And this isn't something that I'll continue doing. It's more out of the necessity of I've been getting into this director lately, and uh, I reviewed three of his films already, one of which was my last review. My last review was for Enter the Void. And the director, by the way, is the French director Gaspar Noé. My last review was his psychedelic, transcendental Enter the Void. And then before that, I reviewed probably his most controversial, which is Irreversible. Probably still my favorite. And then, somewhat recently, I reviewed his most recent film, Climax, which actually is a horror film. And I had a lot of fun with this one. So this is the last one I have by Noé, at least until Vortex comes out later this year. Then I'll definitely be picking that up. And this is actually his first full-length film. This is his directorial debut of a feature length. And it's 1998's I Stand Alone. Now, I say first feature length because this is actually a sequel to a 1991 short film called Carne, which followed the same character, followed by the same actor, which is Felipe Neon, if I pronounce that correctly, known as the Butcher. That's all he's known as in this. And if you've seen French films, you'll know Neon as the killer or truck driver from High Tension. And I was also wondering this, and I just looked it up, and I guess it is true. The opening scene in Irreversible features Neon as well, and I was wondering, because of the things he discusses in that scene and his character in this film, if it was the same character. Turns out it actually is. So the Butcher does make an appearance in Irreversible. Now, and this was made by, I'm not sure how frequent of collaborators they are, such as Lucille Halilovic, if I pronounce that correctly. But she produced it along with, she has a producing credit along with, of editing it along with Noé. It was also written by Noé, and I guess it was made for like $54,000, and it does have a micro budget kind of feel. In fact, it was really reminding me of Man Bites Dog, which I have reviewed, so go check that out. Which that's actually a Belgian film, but just about this very immoral, not very good character, but shot on this very gritty, almost documentary style way. Although that's found footage, this one is not. But I've also heard this called or be referred to as the French Taxi Driver, which I could not agree more with. This is very much, you follow a guy whose career kind of defines him, really, but you know, also what defines him is a life of loneliness, depression, a need to lash out. There's several scenes and elements in this that are very close to Taxi Driver. I mean, one, there's a scene where he goes to a porno theater, and you have the voiceover narration kind of going over loneliness and how loneliness is everywhere. There is a scene where he points a pistol at a mirror and is kind of not talking to it, but we hear his thoughts as he looks into the mirror. A lot of the lighting is the same, especially inside. I mean, when he's inside a place, it's this very grimy, dirty, like yellow type of lighting. Similar to how when Travis is in the hallway making a phone call to Betsy. which also the final shot is a slow panning shot away from the characters, like when he calls Betsy, and it just pans to the hallway, looking down to the open door. This ends panning to the side, just looking down the street. Much of the story is told through voiceover narration, just talking about his life and his views of the world, like Taxi Driver. And I did look it up to see if Noe was at all inspired by Taxi Driver or tried to make like his version. I haven't found anything regarding that, but if you're a fan of Taxi Driver, you'll probably like this. I will say Taxi Driver is maybe a bit more cinematic. I mean, it's a Scorsese film. This is definitely more gritty, hard-hitting, more in-your-face. But both movies do kind of make you feel like you need to take a shower. I mean, on the cover it says, "In the bowels of France." I do believe that, because like in Taxi Driver, Scorsese really shows you just the bowels of New York City, just the grimiest, worst parts of New York City. With this, I mean, poverty is everywhere. It's just, it looks filthy. Every place we go in this film just looks filthy. Just, you kind of want to take a shower. I would say this one is not as stylish as what would come later, even in his second film, Irreversible. I mean, in contrast, the camera is very stationary, in that it's either still or it's following a character. We don't really have any crazy transitions, save for maybe like the sound of a gunshot. It would be like a rapid cut, or like a rapid like pan down and up or to the side to the sound of a gunshot. There are title cards, which we've seen in some of his other films. Like, it opens up with the words morality, then justice. It does open up with random characters having a conversation, kind of setting the tone for the rest of the film, like in Irreversible. These guys talking about morality, how it's, what did they say? Morality is a law for the rich, or something like that, and then justice is a lot of it. It goes a lot deeper than I can remember to talk about, but basically, the butcher is an angrier Travis Bickle from Taxi Driver. I mean, he's a bigot. He hates everyone around him. He hates the rich. He's disgusted by the poor. I don't know if he's disgusted by the poor, but he hates being poor. We get a brief history of his life told through snapshots and voiceover, which I thought was a nice way to do it. Born in the 30s. It takes place in 1980. And kind of gives us dates as the story moves along. It takes place over the course of a few days at the end of March of 1980. Born in the 30s, his mother abandoned him. His father was killed in World War II. He was molested by a priest. He got into the butcher trade, eventually opened up his own shop, was fairly successful, fell in love with a woman, had a daughter who abandoned him and his daughter. And then his world went to hell one day when his daughter, who is mute and I guess not all there, even though it doesn't quite explain why or how, but she got her first period. And when she went down to his meat shop to find him, he saw the blood on her skirt and assumed that she had been assaulted. So he went after this random guy that he thought was guilty and stabbed him, killed him. So he served some jail time. His shop went under. His daughter was institutionalized. And as the story's being told, I mean, yeah, we get the evidence shots of the knife, her bloody underwear. It's still a hard-hitting no-way film. Uh, I would say this one is a bit more on an emotional level, even though it is also very, very visceral. And then he gets out of prison. He meets this other woman whom he impregnates, moves to North France with her, and there he is completely miserable. He feels destined to work in the meat industry in some capacity, but he hates this new woman whom he's having a child with. She's always nagging him. He gets a job at a deli, but because of his attitude, he gets fired. I can't remember if it's her brother or her brother-in-law or someone gets him a job at an old folks home. But then one day, this elderly woman is suffocating, so the nurse gets him. They try to help her. She dies anyway. The nurse, rattled by seeing death, he offers to walk her home. And most of this movie is his inner thoughts, whether it be his hatred for everyone else around him, or his thoughts about how I just want to have sex with her right now, even though it's pointless. This is a very bleak, I don't know if I want to say nihilistic, but it does feel very nihilistic, where just nothing has a point to it. Like, what's the point of doing anything? We're all going to die, and we're not going to leave any kind of impact behind. But ultimately, he doesn't have sex with her, or even go in her house. He says goodbye, goes to a porno theater. And this porno theater is not blurry like in Taxi Driver. I mean, we get full shots of penetration up on the screen. But a friend of his wife witnesses the walk with the nurse, tells his girlfriend, she confronts him about it, calls him a homosexual slur that begins with F, which there is a lot of those in this. The kindest thing he says about homosexuals, I guess, would be fruitcake. You know, how France is run by fruitcakes. That's probably the nicest thing he says in the whole movie. So when she calls him that, he lashes out by kneeing her in the stomach, and then she falls on the couch and he just punches her repeatedly in the stomach. Then her elderly mother mistakenly says, I'm going to grab the gun. Important rule of gun ownership: never threaten to get the gun and just grab the fucking thing. He hears that. He demands to know where it is. He grabs it and he leaves. He hitches a ride back to Paris and tries to build his life back together with just a pocket full of change. I mean, like 300 francs. He rents a room, the same room he conceived his daughter in. And basically the next act of the film is him going from place to place looking for jobs, going to old friends to look for money, all to no avail. We see just how bad poverty has stricken this area. And each time he meets up with one of his old friends for money or a place to apply for work, it's done in sort of like this montage of interviews where it's just them on the screen, more or less looking at the camera. And after so many places, he goes straight to a successful, like what's the word I'm looking for? A professional slaughterhouse where they kill horses for meat, which I guess that idea came to Noé, who is Argentinian born, and when they went to his mother's native France, his father said to him, they eat horses here. And it was at that point he thought, oh, a horse butcher would make a great character. And he made one. Put him in 3 films. And, you know, thinking that because the proprietor of that slaughterhouse was a client of his when he had the meat shop, thinking he has an in. The guy doesn't really treat him like a schmuck, but he doesn't help him out immediately. He takes that as a slight, and he knows about homosexual rumors about that guy. So he's just going on these mental diatribes about killing him, killing everyone else, how he hates, just lots about hating the rich, killing all homosexuals and the Germans. France is going to hell. Kill the rich. Laws are only around to prevent the poor from being happy. Or the poor are the only ones that get in trouble. The rich can do whatever they want. And he's becoming more and more obsessed with just the idea of a revenge, of 50 years of just life shitting on him. He even goes to a bar, and we hear his thoughts about where he plays out the whole scenario of killing the guy at the slaughterhouse. Doesn't have enough money to pay for his drink, so there's an altercation between him, the bartender's son. He's then sitting in his room where, he points the pistol at the mirror, kind of projects thoughts into it. He's laying on the bed, holding the pistol up. And this is some cool editing where he's talking about, I'm going to go kill Mr. Fancy Pants boss at the slaughterhouse. I'm going to kill the bartender and his son. And he's sort of playing out the scenarios with their voices in his head. But whenever he pretends to pull the trigger, there's up close of his mouth saying bang or boom. And there's like a flash as well. I thought that was some cool editing. But the next day, he goes to pick up his daughter, who's still mute. He brings her back to the room, and I'm going to stop for spoilers here because it does take a few turns. There was a few points where I thought, okay, it's going to end here. Then it kept going. I was like, okay, this has got to end right here. This is a good ending, and it kept going. And it wasn't until, like, the last few moments before the first time I thought it was going to end that his plan really... Because he's had more or less jumbled, incoherent thoughts kind of for the last portion of the film leading up to this point. So I wasn't entirely sure where his plan was going until this. But, and I've also never seen this in a film, probably other than Snuff 102. There's a warning. Only there is like a warning saying you don't need to see this. You can imagine what's happening. Here there's a 30-second countdown to leave the screening. And, there's like blinking red, danger, then a countdown. And I thought, okay, so something intense is going to happen. And, yeah, for years I've known about this film, even after I saw it, that even though I was kind of disappointed at the first time I saw it, knowing it was going to be this kind of like irreversible, this shocking, disturbing, always ranking on those lists type movie. I think I actually saw this before Irreversible. Which at that point to me, shocking and disturbing was like Snuff 102 or a Serbian film. So when I saw this, it was very tame and I was kind of disappointed. I wasn't looking at it at an emotional level or psychological or really anything but the visceral on-screen stuff. I definitely came to appreciate it a lot more this time around. So I'm going to say spoilers here at that warning. I might have already given too much away, but if you are a fan of Noe and you like these three or some of his other ones that I haven't reviewed, like Love or what's the other one? Lux Aeterna. It's definitely worth checking out. I mean, if you like movies like Man Bites Dog or Taxi Driver, especially, it's worth checking out. And yes, this guy is not meant to be likable. He's not meant to be. You're not meant to be able to relate to him. I think he is supposed to be this despicable character who maybe you can relate to in the sense that, okay, he got dealt a shitty hand of cards, but the way he goes about it, just sheer misogyny, blatant racism, and, every kind of phobia that you can have. But above all, he seems to hate himself more than anyone else. And just someone who really is sick of life. But it's shot very well. It does have a very great low budget, gritty, grainy look to it. It is effective. I mean, the scene when he punches his girlfriend's stomach is that kind of hard hitting violence that you can expect from No Way. The atmosphere is very grimy and just you feel dirty just watching it. So if you are a fan of No Way, definitely check it out. Or if you're a fan of Taxi Driver, just on that basis alone, it's worth checking out. But I'm gonna get into spoilers here. So after the 30-second warning, he takes her to his room, and he hugs her. He walks over to the closet, takes out his pistol, and he turns around and looks at her. But then, I think there's a cut where it shows his hand going between her legs, but then it shows her getting off the bed but without her jacket. Pans over to him and he's shirtless, implying that they did have sex. Walks up behind her, shoots her, but he shoots her in the neck, and she's alive and dying, but she's suffering and gurgling. There's pounding on the door, and now his voiceover is just gone wild. I mean, talking about, try to save her, shoot her again, put her out of her misery. Save your bullets, you still got to go kill the boss at the slaughterhouse. You got to kill yourself. Screw the boss guy, just kill yourself. All these different thoughts are just so rampant and just going 100 miles an hour to the point where the next line of internal monologue starts before the previous one even finishes. So, I mean, it really is just a non-stop anxiety, just train of thought. Eventually, he shoots her again. And then you get the sort of a long scene which is actually the one that's on the cover, where he's trying to get himself to kill himself. And of course, the voiceover talking about, just do it, a countdown from 10, do it for your daughter. She's sitting there waiting for you. Oh, wait, she probably hates you. Oh, but do it anyway. He sits on the bed, or lays on the bed, and I thought it was going to end here. Because he pulls the trigger, we hear the bang, it just very briefly goes black. That would have been a very bleak ending to a very bleak movie, but it continues. We go back to when he takes the gun out of the shelf in the closet, before either of them are undressed or touched or anything. He puts the gun back and kind of starts to make a turnaround by saying his whole life was a complete mistake. He never should have been born. But his daughter is not a mistake. She's sort of a beacon of hope. And he goes over and he hugs her. And then she sits down next to him. She hugs him, and then he just breaks down. He hugs her back, he keeps kissing her head, hugs her, kisses her head. And this goes on for a while, with this very sad yet uplifting classical violin piece plays. And then I was thinking, okay, it's going to end right here. Maybe he did find joy in his life, found something that matters. Now it's going to end. No, because after that very long scene, it ends with him. It cuts to the shot of her legs with his hand going between them. So I started thinking, oh, that whole dream sequence is now starting in reality. And I thought maybe it's going to end there on that note, which would have been pretty foreboding. But it cuts from there to him on the balcony, where his daughter walks up to him, hugs him. He hugs her back. He undoes her jacket, starts to fondle her. And then that's when we get that taxi driver pan to more or less empty street, with him trying to justify like his love for her. Like, she makes me happy. Doing to her what I'm doing makes me happy. And who cares if I go to jail? The world will be here when I get out, and if it really sucks, I can always hang myself. And how his love for her is only illegal because it's powerful. He's trying to justify what he's doing to her. But then, of course, we get the opening to this film where it says, I was arrested for having sex with my daughter. Then it ends. And yeah, there's a few title cards that show up throughout, again, like morality and justice. If this movie were to come out today, it certainly would have had a bigger effect than what Joker had, where, when Joker came out, major cities were worried and stationing cops at theaters, thinking some young white guy was going to see it, be inspired, and go nuts. Joker's a great character study. It really is. And Joker is a wonderful movie. I love Joker. It's one of my favorites of 2019. But this feels more visceral. Like, I feel the hatred from this guy. Just, I hear it in his thoughts. I feel it coming off the screen. I really do buy the world that he's in. This feels more like a snapshot in, not really, I guess it's a character study, but not really. This feels more like a snapshot in the life of a guy who's just bored into shit, had a life of crap, and finally isn't taking it anymore. Which Joker was also inspired by Taxi Driver as well. But yeah, I can only imagine if this were to come out today. Now, is it as shocking or disturbing as his other films? Definitely more than Enter the Void. This just feels more like a grounded, and I mean, even the violence and stuff in these two movies, especially this one, is very visceral and hard-hitting. But I think just because of the art house, just cinematography and the angles and just all the camera tricks he's doing with this, and where this is mostly stationary, I feel like it has more impact to it. Certainly makes it feel more grounded, more gritty. I think there's more emotional depth to this movie. I mean, just the way he goes from plotting to have sex with his daughter, then shoot her, and then shoot himself, to essentially deciding not to and just hugging her and breaking down and begging her not to leave him alone. I mean, it is pretty powerful. I mean, to see him go through this whole movie with just, life is shit, I hate everybody, I want the world to end, and life is pointless. to, I guess, find a little bit of life or light in his life, but then decide to defile it. But yeah, it always feels weird to say I enjoyed a movie like this, but I did think it was very well made for its budget, for just the style he went with. Again, it is kind of like Man Bites Dog meets Taxi Driver. It certainly is the French Taxi Driver. Now, how does it rank with Noé's other films? I'd probably say this was the most entertaining. That was the most fun, entertaining time I had. I'd probably say this is still my favorite. Just the attention to detail and what it does for the rape revenge genre and just how it plays with the concept of time and genre. Probably still my favorite. Then I'd probably say this. This is definitely his most, I might say his most interesting. It's definitely the one that has the most fleshed out character, if I dare say that. Certainly his most grounded. And then this, I liked it. It was well made. It was definitely a good visual experience. It just didn't grab me as much as these three. But I am very excited for Vortex to come out. I do have high hopes for that. But this ends my sort of, not really marathon, but dive into Gaspar Noé. I do have a few more 70s proto-slashers and 80s slashers to get to. So stay tuned for those, and thank you for watching.